By the time you get to college and you're thinking about marriage and starting out your life, you don't even remember what it's like to live with a baby, which is shocking. You think about that. So we've got women in their 20s trying to decide when to start their family, and they have no memory of living with a human infant.
Yeah.
So this is all part of, maybe you don't need children, but what would make you want them? And then we're seeing that's all disappearing, right? So of course, what I've sort of showed up to say is, well, there's a lot of ways you can want children, even if they're not needable. We just need to communicate how great children are.
Welcome back to Gen Z Unplugged. We have a very, very good episode for you all today. We talked to Catherine Pakaluk of Catholic University of America. She's a professor. She's an economist. She is the author of Hannah's Children, which is a book that explores the birth rate decline. And she is a wife and a mother. Catherine has some amazing insight and wisdom for future families and some really interesting findings on our economy and how we can support families. So please enjoy our interview with Catherine. Hi, Catherine. Thank you so much for being here with us.
You're so welcome.
Well, I'm super excited for everyone to hear about your story, to hear about your book, Hannah's Children, and your very, very important work that you're doing. So I'd love for you to tell our audience who you are and what you do.
Sure. My name is Catherine Pakaluk, and I teach at the Catholic University of America. So I'm trained as an economist, which sounds maybe either intimidating or incredibly boring, or maybe both. But actually, I'm just a social researcher. So since I was young, really devoted to thinking about the pro-life cause, thinking about the protection of the full dignity of women. And so I feel really blessed to have been able to find a way to apply my talents where I can, kind of advance the cause of women and the unborn, but through my research and teaching.
That's awesome. And through your research and teaching and what you do, you've written an incredible book called Hannah's Children. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us a little bit about this book, why you wrote it, and why you chose that title?
Absolutely. So we are sitting here, a little bit over a year since this book came out. And so maybe with that perspective, it's that would be the most interesting way to explain. A lot of people yesterday and the day before have been circulating online a new poll that's come out indicating that among Gen Z, getting married and having children rank very close to the bottom of the things that they think are most important to achieve in life. Like, what would you say would be the most important things to have to count yourself as successful? And we see getting married and having children is very, very low on the list. So I'll say, that's not why I wrote the book. But now we're seeing, as more years have gone by, the kinds of things that are reflected in our culture, which have led to a kind of crisis of marriage happening later and later, if at all. Mm-hmm. Fewer and fewer adults are married, and then fewer and fewer babies being born pretty much every year. So this year, as of 2025, the revised numbers for 2024 say that the birth rate in the United States, sort of the typical number of children we expect women to have, is under 2, so about 1.5, a little in the high end of the 1.5. Mm-hmm. So really drastically below the number needed to replace ourselves and to sustain the population. And so going back to when I started to write the book, started working on the book, the simple thought was, in a world where no one is having children, or increasingly fewer people are having children, who is having children and why? And so I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to travel around and talk to people who are doing things differently? So I say defying the birth dearth, but I say quietly defying, because it turns out that the women out there having kids, they're not a movement. They're hidden away. A lot of people don't know they're out there. And so that was the thought. The thought was sort of to study success. We might do the same thing, and in the future we may, about marriage, for instance. If most people are getting married at 30 or older, to talk to people who get married earlier and beat the odds. Like, well, what worked for you, or what did you think about? What are the things that had to come together in your life? So this is an important principle, studying success and not focusing on what doesn't work, but looking at what does work. So that was the idea behind the book, was to talk to people who have kids and find out just, like what makes them tick? Like what were you thinking? Did you always want to have a lot of kids? Did you happen into this? Did you grow up in a big family? Did you grow up with no siblings? Just to sort of figure out what they're like. That was the idea. And ultimately, why is it called Hannah's Children? As I struggled for almost 2 years with my data. So what did I have? I had hundreds of pages of transcript testimony. So what I did is I sat down with women and talked to them for, anywhere between an hour and 2 to 3 hours. So there's hundreds of pages of data. And I tried to think, what is the central idea? What is the main theme? What leads people to have more than 1.5 children?
Right.
And the central idea that just kept coming back to me was this, I would say, biblical idea that children are a gift from God, a gift from the Lord. And that maybe, to put that a little bit differently, the way one woman put it, that children are the most important wealth that you could have. And that sounds like almost an old-fashioned way of putting it. And I thought, well, everybody esteems their children once they have children. People love their children. Why is this different? Why is it different to say that my children are my wealth? And the same woman, she said, well, if you really believe that children are wealth, you would also think that you couldn't have too much of that. No one thinks they're done being wealthy.
Yeah, have enough money.
Yeah. So that really, once I started to think about that, I thought, of course, who's the most prominent biblical character who we understand to have been blessed with a child. And so, of course, that's a biblical Hannah. So it all started to come together for me. And I thought, well, the best archetype, the best image for our culture popularly of being blessed with a child is the biblical Hannah. And so Hannah is the name of the book, Hannah's Children. She's also it's also the pseudonym that I give to the first woman you meet in the book, somebody that I talked to and had a really great story. So yeah. So I try to tell the stories through that first person perspective, like what did I hear from them, and make it personal. And so titling the book for a woman and both a historical true woman and also one of the characters seemed like a really personal way to start the stories.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And obviously, with your personal story, you have also been one of these Hannahs. So would you just tell us a little bit about your background and your experience with children?
Yeah, sure. So I grew up knowing I'd like to get married and have children at some point. It was very much at some point. And the old thing about, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans, right. That sort of thing. Yeah. So, well, I was pretty sure I was working with God's plans. I went, I finished college and, got a really generous scholarship to do my PhD work at Harvard. And I thought, well, I'm clearly on a mission from God, and I'm certainly not about to settle down and have children right now because I've got all of these things to do and I'm going to save the world through my research, which, I'm only saying that in jest. I mean, as a young, I thought, well, for sure. So I thought, well, I'll get married and have kids some point, but not now. But in my first year of graduate school, was introduced through mutual friends to my now husband. And my husband was a widower. He had lost his first wife to breast cancer. And believe it or not, his first wife, before she passed away, she said, I see Catherine just moved to town and maybe you should take her out, Wow. I didn't know all this at the time. And so anyway, we did go out, and then we discerned marriage pretty quickly. So what it means is I started out marriage with 6 children.
So how old was your husband at that time?
Yeah, so he was 40.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, and
so
I was 23.
And 6 kids, wow.
Yeah, and I thought, well, this clearly means the end of this big plan where I'm going to do all this research and save the world, and I thought, well, okay, that's right, because God's ways are not always our ways. Yeah. And I thought a lot about that. I was also pretty stressed out about it. I thought, but it just, kind of, and I used to wonder, like, well, why did God put me here just to meet my husband and get married and run off and have kids? Not that there would be anything wrong with that, but in my youthful, I would say, just my idea of my plans, that just seemed really shocking to me. I thought, wow, okay, all right, I know God is, sometimes he's mysterious. This is really mysterious.
Come all the way to Harvard, you'd think that things would be very different.
And I was, I would say, newly devout at that point in time. I like a lot of people, I had gone to a secular university and kind of lost my way. I had kind of fallen away from the church for a while. But by the time I started graduate school, through the grace of God, I'd had a kind of a reversion. So I was really devout, and I really, every day I would go into church and I would ask God to show me what he wanted me to do. So I thought, well, how ridiculous would it be if every day you ask God to show you what he wanted you to do, and then someone comes along and offers to marry you who's a good man. And I thought, well, what good reason would I have to say no to that? And so I thought, okay, like that's just, I just have to trust that it will be resolved someday, that I will know why. And anyways, we got married, and I'm not saying it was not a happy affair. It was a very happy thing. We got married, and just kind of rolled up my sleeves and tried to figure out how to raise his children. And this is all in service of what you asked, really. And then we were blessed with our first baby in the end of that first year of marriage. And I would say a couple things happened. One was that when that first baby was born, a lot of people said, well, this might be hard for your children who lost their mom and they're grieving, and what will they do? And maybe you should wait. It's complicated. But that baby was not only a gift to us personally, but the arrival of that baby really made us a family. And so all those grieving kids, just received this baby, and they received love from that baby that they weren't ready to receive from me yet. And so it really, it was like this eye-opening introduction to motherhood. I was just in love with him. He was just, like the best thing ever.
Right.
And I really thought, wow, like, I don't know what people are talking about. I mean, this is just good. This is like great, right? It's like it's kind of a secret, like you're not supposed to say how much you like being a mom or something like that.
Yeah.
And anyway, so at that point we just thought, well, maybe there was some trepidation here, but why would we put this off? Like, let's just have the children we're blessed with and not get complicated about it, and just see how we go. So anyway, that was, I don't know if I've lost the thread here, but basically we started out marriage with 6 children to raise. 6 wonderful children who we've become really close over these years. And then we went on to welcome 8 more before I was done. And so, yeah, I didn't foresee at that time writing about children as being a big part of my research. That has become became something that I understood later. But what an important part of being able to write the story the way that I wrote it. And that's the part where that's I think why I stressed a little bit this period of blindness, where as a young woman, I thought, God is really calling me to go away from the thing that I thought he wanted me to do. And then now where I can say, sitting here a year after putting this book out, and I can say, no, actually, all of those personal experiences were necessary. They were necessary. I needed to have my heart trained to sort of understand what it means to be deeply attached to children, to see what kind of I guess I would put it like it's kind of muscle. Like we say this, women have a kind of capacity in our being to nurture and to care for other people. And it's so powerful. I needed to see that we could do that not only with our born children, biological children, but with our adopted children. And I needed to see how hard that was. I needed to see that it doesn't always work perfectly immediately the minute you start. I needed to see it takes time. So all those things that when I then later discerned the value of this project and went out to the field to talk to people, I would have written a very different book if I hadn't kind of gone through that thing, which for years seemed really hard. So yeah, I'm here to say, God doesn't make mistakes, and
yeah, he knows what he's doing. He has a plan.
Right. He doesn't make mistakes. So I'm really obviously super grateful for all of that background, because this book needed to be written in the way that it was written, received in the way that it was received. Because I very much felt like I was receiving these precious testimonies, these precious stories. And I'm sure that, just sort of, we'll just say like a straight and narrow kind of economist who didn't have that personal story would have had a hard time receiving those things within their richness and their beauty.
Yeah. Wow. And just what you were saying, like you became a wife at 23 with 6 children. How did you balance being a new wife and balance being a mother at the exact same time? Because in our culture nowadays, especially in like my friend circles and stuff like that, we're told to, put off having children because you want to practice being a wife first and have that relationship with them before you bring another person into the world. So how were you able to balance that so well, like being a wife and having, being a mother to 6 children?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. Well, first of all, I don't know that I want to claim having done it well. I can definitely claim having tried, giving it your best. And I think that when I look back on those years, I'll say a couple of things about your question. When I look back on those years, the main thing I remember is it was really hard. But I also had this clear sense, because it did feel so clearly like a call from God. I think that every marriage is a call from God, and that every maternity is a call from God. This is how we were made, to be able to be spouses and mothers, whether spiritually or physically. But because it was an unusual set of circumstances, I did have that, and I had that need to kind of go to God in prayer and say, well, because you called me to this unusual set of circumstances, I trust that you're going to take us through it, So I think that was at least when I look back in that blur of this is difficult, that is what I remember, is just almost giving it back to God. Like, all right, you called me to this. So, make this make sense. And so, of course, in our marriage, it wasn't possible for us to put off having children, because we got married and had children right away. And on that point, I guess I would say that, the way you put it, I think, is really accurate. I think people use this language of readiness. Like, I'm not ready for a child yet.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's something that, at least I would say in my experience and what I heard from a lot of the people I interviewed, some of them were people who had babies when they didn't think they were ready. And so they had the reason to talk about this. But that, I think, what makes you ready to be a mom, and what makes your marriage sort of ready to mature into being parents, is having a child. It's like nothing readies you like the child in front of you. So if it's a capacity, that's a confidence you have. The confidence is, well, God made us for this, right? And so it made you for it. So the capacity's there. I'm being a plant mom or a dog mom. I mean, those are two things that I don't want to denigrate them. I have 3 dogs. I love my dogs. I'm not a great plant mom. I'm working on it. It's like something I could say I'm a sourdough mom. People do say that.
Oh boy.
I do feel like
you have to mother the culture. Yeah,
you do. I think that's like, you put them to bed. I mean, I think there's a lot of mothering involved.
Yeah.
Yes,
I've killed a few.
Yes,
so
right. That's exactly right. But I think we see in all of those things like that. Just there's nothing like learning by doing. So I think those are the two things. Like confidence, if God calls you to it, God will give you the grace to do it. And then the second is that our culture is just so obsessed with planning, so obsessed with planning. And I do think that it's a little seductive. And it's seductive how? Because it seems like it's responsible. It's like, oh, I'm gonna get all my stuff lined up, right? Like my bank account, like whatever it is. And so it seems really responsible. And yet there's a certain type of planning which clearly encroaches onto God's space, right? Because God is the Lord of the universe, and he created everything. And, it doesn't mean he wants to boss us all around. That's clearly not his mode.
Yes.
I like to say he governs things sweetly, but that it is also clear that he wants us to trust him. And so we will not learn to trust if we don't ever do things that are sort of beyond us, right? It's like, I don't know, like those images from movies, like stepping out into the deep, so to speak, or like, walking, Peter getting out of the boat and walking in water, right? It's like, in real life, like IRL, you have to be terrified or you're not trusting, right? It's like, it took me a while to figure out what that was. But
I'm very impressed.
I'm like, what is it? I'm always looking these things up. Anyway, but I think about this a lot. Like, there's no way around it. What we really want to be told is like, we want to know it's going to be fine. And then simultaneously be like, I'm trusting you, God. But like, if you know it's going to be fine, how much trust is there? Yeah. You sort of have to be terrified, I think. I mean, like I'm not counseling being terrified, but but I do think that's so important. So this thing about being ready, I do think a lot of that is coming from that. Mm-hmm. It is legitimately scary to marry someone when you believe marriage is a union for life.
Right.
That is legitimately scary and hard. Mm-hmm. And it is legitimately scary, especially, I'll say this as a woman, when you're like, oh my goodness, I'm expecting a baby and there's only one way for this baby to get born.
Yeah, right. The actual process of life itself.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Yes. I think it's okay to acknowledge that is terrifying and is a huge burden on us. So yeah, I think readiness, we just have to dive in and then God provides.
Yeah. And on that same note of readiness, I think, for the couples who are ready, they're married and they're just open to life.
Yeah.
What would you say to, a couple that is considered ready, but they're concerned about the quantity of children, whether it be concerns over, you hear this a lot. Well, how are we going to give 8 kids a great life when we could give 2? It's so much easier to give 2 kids a great life. So how do you address those concerns?
Yeah. So although my book is about people who do have a lot of children, I'll definitely make it clear that I don't think we should go into marriage thinking I want to have a lot of children. Mm-hmm. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. A child is a great gift. So you should want gifts. Like that's great. But what I heard mostly, and if I'm trying to be faithful to the women that I talked to, I heard a lot of I didn't have a number in mind. I just wanted to be open to receive the blessings God would send. Mm. And the beautiful thing about that is it takes it out of the realm of an accomplishment of ours, and it takes it away from something that we can be proud of or, and that's important because not everyone is blessed with children. And so those of us who are blessed with children, we don't want to puff it up like it's some kind of accomplishment of ours, right? We are never worthy to receive the gift of our children. And I think when we see it so deeply as a blessing and a gift from God, it really helps us to have more solidarity and sympathy for those people who aren't blessed. So having said that, I always just think, don't worry about 5 or 8 or 10, just one at a time. And so I think that's important. So each moment of openness, and there's times when I won't say can't be open, but there's times when you have to wait to be prepared, healthy in body and soul. For instance, just after you have a baby, it would be probably, for most of us, it would be unusual right after a baby's born to think I'm going to run right out and try for the next one.
Yeah, definitely.
Most of us need a little bit of time to recover. And so those periods of time when we know we can't be open right now, but we'd like to be open to a baby in the future. That's this kind of, it's almost like the readiness of the bride waiting for her wedding. Maybe one of us here is that.
A little relatable.
It's like that God is preparing something great for you, but it's not here yet. And so there's this moment of just, it's like a kind of hopeful, watchful waiting. And I think that I saw that really beautifully in a lot of the women I interviewed. So to the people who are worried about 8, just worry about 1 or 2. Just the next one. Just, is God calling you to the next one? And so even a simple message would be not to close the door permanently. So even if you're not ready today, like today isn't a good time. Maybe this year isn't a good time. Your husband's struggling at work. There are things that aren't going right and you have to wait for a while. To see that as the cross that it is, we can't accept a child right now. We're really excited to maybe be there in the future. We really hope and pray God will bring us there in the future. So just one at a time. But I think just not closing the door, that's already such a different way to live our motherhood from what the culture says. The culture says you pick this moment, you plan it out, you have your kids, and then you're done.
Yeah.
Right? So just not being done and practicing that watchful excitement that God will help you and your husband to see when is the next time you can be ready. And then you just have that beautiful kind of cooperation, that sense of discernment. Things aren't out of control. You're not we just don't know when we might, because I don't think that's that's not the way we're meant to live our marriages and sort of embrace the gift of our fertility. That there's a lot of trust and providence, but that actually what God wants is for us to feel ready and healthy. And so one at a time. And if it ends up that through God's cooperation and his, ridiculous gifts, like that you end up with 4 or 6, or more than you ever imagined when you were a little girl. Yeah, praise God.
Wow.
And if you end up with 2, praise God too, right? Because that's, he knows what he's doing, no mistakes, right?
Oh,
That's a
so
beautiful way to put it.
Yeah,
honestly.
the watchful, the hopeful waiting.
Yeah.
I love that.
I love that.
Yeah.
And kind of going with what you were saying, with being open and like waiting for that gift. There's a big conversation topic about the financial aspects of children, and maybe they are open to life, but they financially cannot, or they don't think they can financially give them a life that they want their child to have. Coming from your like economic, background in this, what advice and what would you say, and what's your kind of knowledge of that, of a young couple, getting married soon, and they are open to life, and our economy, today is not really built around that aspect of young families with a home, with children, with a backyard, stuff like that. What would you kind of say with all of that going on?
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing is to step back and think about the culture that we're in. A lot of people use that language of culture of life versus culture of death.
Right.
It's, I think, a great language. And so what are the tools of the culture of death when it comes to children, welcoming children? And so if we step away from sort of building your family and think about how the pro-abortion industry has really spun and promoted a lot of lies around having children. And you see, what's one of the biggest lies that the pro-abortion industry tells young women, expectant women, single mothers? You can't accept this child because a child is a lot of money. It's not the only lie they tell you, but it's one of the biggest ones. All right. So the reason I'm setting this up that way is because it's really important to see that type of language in its I guess it's raw kind of condition, its raw state, which is that it's mostly used by people who want to tell you not to have a child.
Yeah.
Or even worse, they want to use it to convince you to destroy your child who's already living. All right. So like, is a baby super expensive? Is it be like $500,000 before they're, 18? I mean, all of that stuff that you see, I mean, we could pull them up in a minute, right? If we had a, producer offset, we'd like, pull up those ads, having a child is so expensive. And we have to push back on that, right? So do babies cost something? Of course they do. Do we have a medical establishment and a sort of healthcare system in which, let's just say, a lot of people don't know exactly how much it's going to cost, even just to give birth? Yeah, 100%. That's a problem. We can fix that. But just subjectively, the objective truth, does a baby cost you money? Well, yeah, but it's just a little tiny bit. I mean, especially when they're newborns, they just cost a little tiny bit. Very generous society we live in. Most women are blessed with a network of friends. You receive more things than you can imagine with those first babies. So the advice would be, understand that the idea that a baby is too expensive is mostly coming from those who oppose life. And so then to see, well, what does God say? What does God say? Well, God says that, we think about the Hebrew scriptures and the early Christian tradition. You have this expression in almost every language that every child comes with a loaf of bread under its arm. Have you heard this?
Yeah.
There's a couple of different, I tried to figure out when I was writing the book exactly where that comes from. And it looks like there are versions of this that are attached to the Torah, similar to the Jewish teachings, but it's moved its way into lots of different languages and a lot of languages. So that's closer to the truth. So if we get down to the social science of it, like simple things, we know that married men with children really perform very well in the labor market. And if you look at their wages over time, you see that they do really very well. I think couples starting out, and I say this to women too, should really be smart. They should do everything they can to maximize their opportunity to make money, to secure themselves. Women especially should be credentialed and skilled in ways that they can earn money at home. Working from home is like the biggest sort of hack you can have as a potential mother. But I just think, all of those things we can work through them, but the prior thing is just to reject the idea that like babies are too expensive. It goes the other way around. It's like welcome life and those blessings of financial sustenance seem to come along.
Yeah.
So of course you have to work hard. God wants us to work hard. It's not necessarily going to be easy, but
yeah.
And it's just all so good. This is so interesting. I want to backtrack a little bit to talk about the birth dearth. And you kind of hinted at this, but could you kind of give us more of an idea of the reason for that? Because you hear a lot of people, I mean, and I don't know how radical this is because you hear it, but like overpopulation concerns. I have peers who have said, well, I'm not going to have a baby because there's too many people, or I'm concerned about the environment, climate change or whatever. There's a lot of these kind of scare tactics, but how would you explain the reason for this decline?
Yeah. The simplest way to think about the reason for the decline, and I'm going to use a couple of different words for it, but I'll just start with the easiest one. The easiest one is that people don't want children that badly, and they don't need children at all. All right, so I'm going to try to unpack that. So they mostly don't want children that badly, and they don't need children at all. And what I mean is you can go through your whole life and not have a child. And having a baby when you start out in life, unless you have a belief system that tells you that this is transcendent and worth doing, it doesn't add to your income. We just discussed that. I mean, maybe it's not going to kill you off financially, but it's not like, well, if I have a baby, I'll be more prosperous. Okay, so going backwards, what do I mean? I mean, basically that in an ordinary human sense, like everybody still needs to work, right? We don't live in a socialist utopia. And of course, there is no such thing as a socialist utopia. Right?
Set the record straight.
Right? It's not a thing, right? And what that means is we all have to work in order to take our place in this wonderful society. But you need to work. But no one needs to have children. Not in that way. So what would have been more true in the past? A young couple would have gotten married. Maybe you're like living on a farm or somewhere. So, well, if you didn't get about to having children pretty quickly, you were going to really struggle to take care of all the animals that you'd like to have, right? So maybe you have a cow. Well, you'd also like to have chickens. Maybe you have chickens and you also like to have some goats. I mean, you keep going. You take care of all those animals, make all the sourdough and the yogurt and all the things, the cheese you're making in your own house. And you start out life and you think, well, if we're lucky, we'll be blessed by God with a bunch of children and our life will be better in a very concrete way. And that's something that I guess I like to put it, it's like a wound that children have suffered, which is that we don't really need them anymore. So what's left over is if we really want them, right? So there's only, if you think about it, there are only two reasons to do anything. You either need to do it, you want to do it, or hopefully both. Like hopefully you want to do the things you need to do. But we can all think of a few things that we, like going to the dentist. I hate going to the dentist.
Yes.
I need to do it, but I don't want to do it. I don't know, would I be a better person if I brought myself around to wanting that thing, right? But then we also can name things that we don't really need to do, but we want to do them. For me, that definitely relates to things I bake. So like the sweets, Just like, well, I just really want that dessert, but I don't really need that dessert. All right. So we really have to worry about things that are important that we don't feel a need for. Those are all the things that you have to be like, uh-oh. So we don't need church in that sort of like visceral way. Like I'd get to the end of my day and if I didn't walk into the church building, would anything materially be different? Truth is no. So we see this. It's like, well, how do we, in every age, this has to happen. How do we reconvert people's hearts to see that you do need God, even though, nothing seems different from the morning to the night if you didn't pray or you didn't stop and see God. So children, this is the best way to understand this. Yes, housing costs a lot these days. Is that the deal? No, that's not the whole deal. That's a tiny, tiny piece of the deal. Yes, it's taking us a long time to get through college and maybe graduate school, land our first job, kind of get our footing. People are starting their sort of adult lives in their mid-20s. Maybe that would have been, their late teens. And so they're arriving at the time to have kids later. So there's a lot of things that are unique to our time. That is not the whole deal. The whole deal is children used to be sort of an economic asset to the household, and they are no longer. So I mentioned labor. They used to also be old age support.
Yeah. You
would think, well, like, who's going to take care of us? Well, am I just going to borrow from my friends when I get older? Like, who's going to take care of you? And you might even need a few things beyond just the money or the cash. And we're seeing this now. It's very difficult to staff care homes for older older adults, right? So those are two things. And then, of course, even if you got rid of the need for labor and the need for old age support, children used to be sort of the price of getting married and coupling up. Mm-hmm. And that is a strong need. We all need to find our partner, to find our spouse. But before really effective contraception, you would have gotten married and thought, well, I don't know if I want kids that badly, but I definitely need to be married and love being married. And so, well, some kids will come along and I'll learn to like it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think that would have been more normal. So what I've just described sounds kind of boring. It sounds kind of like, well, it's not very romantic. You mean people weren't having tons of kids in the past because they all just thought children were the best thing ever? I think we should never romanticize the past like that. So I think basically we would, in the econ language, we say, well, demand for children has fallen. It's like you might want to have one kid to be a parent or participate in parenthood. That's a kind of need, you could say even. But you only need one kid to do that.
Right.
And nothing says you got to do that when you're 20. You could do that like when you're 35. Mm-hmm. And so that later start is also reflected in not really wanting kids that much. So when I say we don't want children that much, I don't mean that as an insult to anybody. I think you have to be taught to want children.
Yeah.
You have to learn that children are valuable. If you didn't grow up with babies, well, who grows up with babies these days? Well, if you're from a 2-child or a 3-child household, which is pretty normal, mm-hmm. by the time you get to college and you're thinking about marriage and starting out your life, you don't even remember what it's like to live with a baby, which is shocking. You think about that. So we've got women in their 20s trying to decide when to start their family, and they have no memory of living with a human infant.
Yeah.
So this is all part of, maybe you don't need children, but what would make you want them? And then we're seeing that's all disappearing, right? So of course, what I've sort of showed up to say is, well, there's a lot of ways you can want children, even if they're not needable. But that wanting comes from faith, strong faith traditions, and many of them. I mean, I talk to women of all faiths, mm-hmm. And it could come from a kind of a lived experience with young children. So maybe coming from a larger family or coming from a community that really treasured children. And by and large, I think that's great news because it tells us we don't need to wait for some new economic system. Mm-hmm. We just need to communicate how great children are.
Yeah, that's interesting that you put it like that because I'm the youngest of 8 in my family, mm-hmm. 8 siblings. And I never changed a diaper. I never saw my other older siblings when they were babies, but I got to do that with all my nieces and nephews. And like, yes. I will never forget the first time changing a diaper or holding like the oldest niece when she was first born and, seeing her. It was beautiful, but like I had never experienced that until, my oldest sister had her first baby. Right. And it brought a lot to perspective. But yeah, and kind of going back to the economy part of having a large family, do you think there is ever a point or a time where we can get our economy to incentivize people to have larger families instead of a 1 or 2 like children families that we see a lot now?
Yeah. So a lot of people are asking this question. I think it's a great question. A young man at a university I spoke at this week put it some sort of similar. He said, well, okay, you've just said that no one needs children anymore. Is there some way for us to make children needable again? Can we actually do that? Yeah. And so I'm a little bit, I'm not optimistic we could do that. And here's the reason. I mean, certainly we could like send everybody a check. We could be like, well, when you have your baby next, like here's a couple $1,000. Mm-hmm. Like baby bonuses people talk about. Right. And I'm not going to get in anybody's way. If we have the money as a society and we want to spread it out that way, like, of course, we don't actually have the money. That's a very separate conversation. We are all in the West. We are all bankrupt. We're all running out of money. And that has a separate set of political and economic problems. But if you had the money, like you had like the treasury and it was just stocked, and you thought, well, like how are we going to reward people in society? If you want to send people money after they have a baby, I'm not going to get in your way. Yeah. Like I'm not. We implicitly reward all kinds of things. We explicitly reward all kinds of things. We reward childbearing, fine. But the problem is bigger in the sense that when you think about like what it would look like, that you think like my life is qualitatively going to be better. That is an incentive built into nature. That's really big. Mm-hmm. Or when you think about we could use that language of incentive, the incentive of like a man and a woman in love really want to come together. And normally speaking, absent contraception, that is going to make a baby.
Mm-hmm.
That is a really powerful incentive that is difficult to difficult to put like a number on that. What would be the number that would really cause people? And then here's the last way to think about it. It's like we've talked a little bit about how maybe babies aren't as expensive as people like to say, but in the aftermath of, we'll call it like the women's movement, the later women's movement, the 1960s, the time when women really shifted their priorities to schooling and the workforce. What has actually happened is a certain type of cost of having a baby has gone up. And that cost is the cost of not doing whatever you were trained to do and dropping out of the labor force for at least a few months, if not a few years, depending. And so could we imagine an economic system or approach or policy that could compensate people for stepping away from a job that they love? It's easy to imagine compensating people for stepping away from a job that they hate. Mm-hmm. But a lot of women, and we want to celebrate this, right? A lot of women have been trained to do things that they're really good at. They're wonderful, valuable members of all kinds of, companies and for-profits, not-for-profits. And so that's the other thing. Like I interviewed a woman who was a great musician, but by the time she had her 5th baby, she really had to step away from recording music. Can you incentivize somebody to not record the music that they, she was okay with that. She thought, well, I've put that on the back burner and I will come back to my music later. It's just that those kind of sacrifices, what you give up to have a baby, they're really personal and they're different for all of us. So going back to what I first said, I think if you had the money and you wanted to honor people's sacrifices or their contributions to society and send them a check, like, I don't think that's an evil thing to do. I think that's fine. But will it bring about a kind of revolution in having children that we would maybe want to see? I don't think so. I think that something inside of you has to be like, it is worth it to get up in the middle of the night 3 times for the next year. It's worth it's worth it to me. Like this child, right? For this child I prayed, right? Like this child is so worth it to me that I'm willing to take on these really intense personal sacrifices. And I don't think I'm not trying to stress the sacrifices so that people are more worried about having babies, but just to say, like, you got to have a reason. I don't know, like, to me, that kind of thing, it's like my friends who are long distance runners. I'm not, but I'm like, something's driving you and it's not, you know what I mean? It's not like the honor, clearly.
Yeah.
Because it's just so much pain. It's like so much pain you take on. And so of course we should respect it and honor it in the way that is appropriate for society. I mean that about childbearing. But something has to be in there. Like the fire of, I'm pleased I made this choice. I'm really committed to this choice. And isn't that right? We want moms who are like committed and pleased they made that choice, and not like, well, I was on the fence till I got that check. Well, it just took me over the edge. Oh, Johnny, you were born in the era of the baby bonus. Like,
That's so funny.
I know, it's kind of silly, right?
Yeah. Well, talking about sacrifices, I think young women are very afraid that they're going to have to drop a thriving career or they'll never get to a point in their career. And I know we're almost out of time, but I have to ask this question because it's so relevant, because so many of the young women we work with at the Luce Center want to know. So what do you say to people who don't want to pursue big families, don't want to pursue families right now because they're worried that is going to stop them from having a thriving career?
Yeah. I think that concern is incredibly real. I think it feels really tense and difficult. I felt it. I really did. I thought when I got married, I thought, well, this is it. I really thought I was choosing either or.
Right.
And I think that's, first of all, people say this about youth, and it's so true. The older you get, you're like, yeah, when you're young, you're just, everything is either or. And I think so, but here's what I'm going to put this on my generation to continue to say, maybe to say better than we've said it in the past. It is not an either or situation. Nothing about being open to motherhood and embracing marriage at a younger age than maybe your peers means that you can't be excellent at what you do, or that you can't still give your gifts back to the Lord ultimately, right? I always say, look, God gave you your gifts, and he gave you all your gifts for motherhood and your gifts to serve society in different ways. I mean, young women are disproportionately interested in doing good with their careers, right? We know this. We've seen this. This is something I love that Allie Beth Stuckey talks about, the way in which that desire to do good can get twisted oftentimes.
Yes.
Yeah.
But we should acknowledge and celebrate that what women often want to do with their careers and there is something that's giving witness to something that's true. They want to help people. Okay, so that's great. We don't want to not celebrate that. We want to say that's wonderful. But here's the thing. It's like, look, God doesn't make mistakes. He gave that to you. So those of us who have passed through the younger period of time when things seem black and white, we have to just stress and then try to model that no one would be more pleased to see all of your gifts be used and to their fullest capacity. No one will be more pleased with that than God, because he created you, right? And he knows all those things. But we are so limited, and we're so especially when we're young, we're like, oh, we just see what's in front of us. So in a sense, I'm just here to say, I'm just one woman. But in my life, look how it worked out, that it's not just that I was able to do a little bit of good with my work, but that God needed my personal story and my personal leaning into motherhood to do that work. And that's where I think, there's a little bit of trust. But we don't trust God if we don't first say the struggle is real. And so I just want to say to everybody listening that don't be embarrassed to be afraid you're going to lose yourself. Don't be ashamed. It shows that I don't trust God if I'm attached to this, or it shows that I don't value family enough if I should just be it should be nothing at all to just sort of walk away for these things I learned to do. No. I think we celebrate it. It's so wonderful. God is so pleased. God wanted this time in human history when we would grow up, and girls would go to school too, right? And we would think about what it meant to grow up with a truly feminine education, right? And that we would be able to work from home to help solve poverty, to help women in crisis pregnancies, to help the political culture, whatever it is that we're working on, that God celebrates that. God wanted this. He foresaw this. He does not want us to go back to a time when we could only, let's say, realize a certain portion of our talents and gifts. So I think it's so okay to have that fear, because it's real and it's human, and because it's a real good. We are not looking at a case where here's the true good is getting married and having children, and this other thing is just vain, right? But I think that's a temptation.
Yeah.
And it's a temptation, and then sometimes, self-righteous people, or people who are, again, maybe with their best intentions, trying to persuade people to prioritize marriage and family. I think that's the wrong way to go about it, because I just think it's false. It's false that those things are vain. No, God made you for that, right? That your beauty, to care about and treasure your beauty as a woman isn't vain, right? God gave that to you. He didn't make that mistake. So I guess the best I can do is just to affirm the fear and say that it's okay to have the fear. But we don't want to live in our fear. With everything else, we want to pray, have insight, and to sort of proceed with the treasure of wisdom that we all have in front of us, which is God first, family second, and then gifts in society third, right? So put them in order, right? And there's an appropriate time to get married, and so we should not shun marriage and children when they're coming to us. But if someone isn't on our doorstep knocking or giving us that big ring yet, it's okay. Just continue to serve the Lord.
Yes.
But to just always remember God, family, country, so to speak, or service. And so to put them in order. And when family comes knocking on our door, or our Prince Charming, right, it would never be right to put that off, right? Because God means us to live out those gifts through our service to our family and to God. So they will not be ever in conflict. Not really.
Right.
On a given day, they might be in conflict. Right? For a few minutes, they might be in conflict, maybe for a few years. But God will sort of resolve all of that. And it is just a trick of the devil to make us think that God's creation, which is just so complex and rich, beautiful, that it could ever possibly be in conflict with itself, right? And the minute you put it that way, you're like, oh, of course, obviously it's not in conflict. Anyway, so my heart goes out to anybody that's in that oh no, what do I do phase? Because I lived it.
Right.
I think I lost 10 pounds before my wedding, just not on purpose because I was so stressed out. I was like, I can't believe I am walking away from all of these other things that I was meant to do. Yeah. But God really does answer all the desires of your heart, and all of them. And the other ones that are not for children and marriage, he puts them there, and we need to train them always a little bit, but like he put them there. So I think we can have a lot of like just optimism and hope, that kind of ready excitement, like what's coming next? It's going to come. It'll come at some point. But we just have that patient understanding. It will not look like a male timeline, right? Because we're women. Yeah. And that's, I think, something that I think it's a great moment right now, right? We're going through a lot of like realignments. And one of them, I think, will be for your generation, our children's generation, is a better understanding of we don't have to do everything at the same time. Yeah.
So much freedom in that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, Catherine, thank you so much for coming on today. It was a delight having you. I love this conversation.
You're welcome.
And yeah, if you want to tell our audience where they can find you, where they can find your book, that'd be awesome.
Sure. So I'm at the Catholic University. My book is probably Amazon is the best place to buy it. Of course, you could get it from the publisher as well, Barnes & Noble's website, but Amazon. But I do really want to recommend the Audible or the Spotify version, because the narrator who narrates it is really great. And it is a long book. So, if you want to pop it in while you're working out or whatever else you're doing in the car, driving around, the narrator is excellent. And then stay tuned. There's a sequel coming maybe in the next probably year and a half. We are hitting the road to interview men. So hopefully I'll have more great stories to tell you in a little while.
That's awesome. Great. That'll be exciting.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Catherine.
You're so welcome.
Yes, thank you.